Good morning everybody and welcome to the presentation of the Q1 Labour Force Survey or LFS results in what are very changed circumstances today. Before we discuss the data aspect of today's presentation, I want to first give you some information in relation to COVID-19 and the Labour Force Survey. I want to first refer you to the information note published yesterday outlining the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the Labour Force Survey, and I want to revisit some of the aspects of that note this morning. The results today are compiled in the usual manner using the standard ILO or International Labour Organizational criteria, and these are the international standard. The CSO is obliged by EU regulation to compile labour market estimates using these concepts and definitions. COVID-19 has had a minimal impact on Q1 2020 results, as it only impacted on the last 2 weeks of the quarter for a limited number of sectors. However, the CSO has already published COVID-19 adjusted unemployment estimates from the months of March and April, and today we're including in the release COVID-19 adjusted estimates of employment for the end of March and the end of April. The COVID-19 crisis had had a significant effect on data collection for the LFS. As you will be aware, data collection prior to the COVID-19 crisis consisted of a mix of face-to-face interviewing and telephone interviewing. However, the CSO advised in its press release of the 20th of March that all face-to-face interviewing for social surveys by the CSO had been suspended. From that point on, all labour force interviewers have been conducted over the telephone. This has impacted on survey response and subsequently sample size, and we are observing this already with Q2. Coming back now to the International Labour Organization or ILO concepts and definitions, let me review these for your information. Firstly, a person is classified as employed if during the reference week he or she worked for 1 hour or more for payment of profit. That includes working on the family farm or business. And secondly, if a person was away from work during the reference week but had a job to return to. A person is classified as unemployed if during the reference week he or she was, first of all, not working, had taken active steps to seek employment in the previous 4 weeks, and in the 2 weeks after the survey was available for work. Finally, a person is classified as inactive if he or she does not fulfil the conditions for being either employed or unemployed. However, specific rules govern the ILO activity status of persons who are temporarily laid off from their job depending on the degree of attachment to the job. A person is classified as still being employed if the expected period of absence is within 3 months, or if the person continues to be paid at least half their wage or salary, where the period of absence extends beyond 3 months. A person on layoff is classified as unemployed if the expected period of absence is more than 3 months or unknown and the person continues to receive less than half its wage or salary from its employer. Secondly, the person needs to have taken active steps in the 4 weeks prior to the survey to find work and is available for work within the following 2 weeks. If the person fails to meet the conditions for being unemployed, he or she will be classified as inactive. So what does this mean for persons on the temporary wage subsidy scheme and the pandemic unemployment payment? By being paid their wage or salary through the temporary wage subsidy scheme, such persons will still be classified as being employed because they continue to be paid at least half their wage or salary. The likelihood is that a large proportion of those persons receiving the pandemic unemployment payment will be classified as inactive, as while they may have been available for work, they may not have been seeking work in the previous 4 weeks. Moving now to the data element of the presentation, and I just want to bring you through the headline numbers this morning. The headline numbers are a mixture of the standard ILO criteria numbers and also the COVID-19 adjusted estimates that we've produced. Using the standard ILO criteria, the unadjusted number of persons aged 15 and over in employment stood at 2,353,500 in Q1 2020, with an associated employment rate of 69.8% for those aged 15 to 64 years. At the end of March, the COVID-19 adjusted measure of employment, or the lower bound of the number of persons aged 15 and over in employment, is estimated to have been just over 2,070,000, with an associated COVID-19 adjusted employment rate of 61.1% for those aged 15 to 64 years. Using the standard ILO criteria, the unadjusted number of persons aged 15 to 74 who were unemployed in Q1 2020 stood at 114,400, with an associated unemployment rate of 4.7% for those aged 15 to 74 years. At the end of March 2020, the COVID-19 adjusted measure of unemployment, or the upper bound of the number of persons aged 15 to 74 who were unemployed, was 382,311, with an associated COVID-19 adjusted unemployment rate of 15.5% for those aged 15 to 74 years. Finally, using standard ILO criteria, the labour force was just under 2,468,000 in Q1, and those not in the labour force was 1,490,500. Continuing now with the standard ILO criteria estimates, male employment increased by 33,100 or 2.7% over the year, while female employment increased by 1.7% or 18,400. Full-time and part-time employment also increased over the year. Full-time employment increased by 2.3%, while part-time employment increased by 1.9%. Part-time underemployment was 111,800 in Q1, and this accounted for 23.2% of total part-time employment in the same quarter. Moving now to the economic sectors, and in Q1, employment increases were recorded in 10 of the 14 economic sectors. The greater rates of increase were in the information and communications sector, which was up by 8.3% or 9,800, and the financial insurance and real estate's activity sector, which was up by 7.8% or 8,600. On the other hand, the greater rates of decrease were in the accommodation and food services sector, which was down by 2.5% or 4,400, and the transportation and storage sector, which was down by 1.9% or 2,000. The number of self-employed persons and the number of employees increased by 2.4% and 2.2% over the year. Seasonally adjusted employment was 2,372,200 in Q1 2020, and that represented just an increase of 1% or 22,800 over the quarter. Turning now to unemployment, and again using the standard ILO definitions, the unemployment rate in Q1 2020 was 4.7%. In volume terms, there were 63,100 males and 50,700 females classified as unemployed. Male unemployment was down by 3.3%, while female unemployment was up by 4.6%. The long-term unemployment rate, that is persons unemployed for 12 months or longer, was 1.3% in Q1 2020, and that's down from 1.7% a year earlier. There were 31,900 people classified as long-term unemployed in Q1, and this accounted for 27.9% of the total number of unemployed. When seasonally adjusted, the unemployment rate was up from 4.7% to 5% over the quarter. In volume terms, the seasonally adjusted number of persons unemployed was up by 6.6% to 123,500 over the quarter. Moving now to the labour force, and still abiding by the standard ILO criteria, the total number of persons in the labour force in Q1 was up by 2.1% to just under 2,468,000. In terms of decomposing the change in the labour force, there was a positive demographic effect of 27,700 and a positive participation effect of 23,900. On a seasonally adjusted basis, the labour force increased very slightly over the quarter to 2,472,000. That concludes the data aspect of this morning's presentation, and I'll move now to inform you about forthcoming releases from the Labour Market and Earnings Division. The first up is the industrial disputes for Q1 of this year, which will be published on the 29th of May next. The monthly unemployment live register for May will be published on the 3rd and 5th of June next. The earnings hours and employment costs, or the EHECS, results for Q1 will be published on the 9th of June. The Labour Force Survey Employment Series for Q1 of this year will be published in July next, as will the updated results for the recent release Work and Life Effects of COVID-19, which will be based on the first 3 weeks of June. That will also be published in July. Finally, the results for Q2 of this year are scheduled to be published on the 25th of August next. As always, users should check the CSO release calendar for upcoming releases. So, in summary this morning, therefore, the CSO is obliged to use the standard ILO criteria for calculating labour market estimates, and therefore the core results today continue to abide by these. The COVID-19 crisis has had minimal effect on the results for Q1, as it only affected limited sectors for the last 2 weeks of March. However, the CSO has supplemented the usual labour market estimates with COVID-19 adjusted measures of employment and unemployment. This approach preserves the methodology of the LFS, while at the same time providing some transparency around the effects of COVID-19 on the labour market. Finally, users will have noted the Work and Life Effects of COVID-19, which was published on the 13th of May last. This is based on the early part of Q2 and provides timely insights into the effect of COVID-19 on the Irish labour market. And as I've mentioned previously, an updated version of this release based on the first 2 weeks of June will be published in July of this year. Thank you very much for your attention this morning, and I would encourage anybody with questions to email them to labour@cso.ie. Thank you.